Hello and welcome. We're so glad that you've decided to join us for what we are calling our worldwide webinar series on prematurity awareness. All through Prematurity Awareness Month this November, the Preparent Alliance and the Family Advocacy Network of the National Perinatal Association are bringing you this series to give you an idea of what prematurity and the premature experience look like for parents around the world. During this month, we'll focus on three different objectives. The first is to learn about what the NICU experience is like in each country. What are the factors that affect what it is that families experience, and how it is that care is delivered, and in what sorts of settings. As we do that, we'll try to understand what the unique challenges are that families face from area to area, country to country, geography to geography, as they navigate what is often a difficult experience. As we do this, we also hope to begin to understand not only what is different and disparate in our neonatal intensive care, but also what is universal. What are the things that all families need, experience, and appreciate from those who care for our incredibly fragile infants? This first interview that we're doing, we focus on the country of Ireland. Ireland has approximately 4,500 preterm births a year. This means that their prematurity rate is just above 6%, which really is quite exceptional when you look at what it can be in other countries, including rates in industrialized and medically advanced countries that can still hover around 11 or 12%. This 6.4% prematurity rate means that roughly 1 in every 16 women can be expected to deliver preterm. When looking at the causes in Ireland and what we know about why women deliver preterm, you can see that, like in many other places, about half of the time we don't know what has happened at all. Actually, I would even say they're a little bit better. About a third of the pregnancy-related causes that are identified, we know are ruptured membranes. About 20% of the time women deliver preterm, it's due to complications because of high blood pressure, including preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. And really, it's only about 23% of the time that we're not able to identify what the factors are that led to early delivery and to an infant requiring neonatal intensive care in the hospital. We're so grateful today to be joined by, first, my co-host, Kira Sorrells from the Preparent Alliance, who's going to be helping lead us in this discussion today of prematurity awareness, but also with our first presenter, Mandy Daly. We're so happy you joined us. Mandy Daly is from the Irish Neonatal Health Alliance. Mandy is also the parent of a beautiful daughter who was born preterm in 2006. Mandy, thank you so much for joining us. And can you begin now to tell us a little bit about your prematurity journey?
Thanks so much for having me. My baby, Amelia Faith, was born in 2006, and I'd had a high-risk pregnancy. But unbeknownst to myself, I was categorized as high risk just because of my age. I was 36 at the time. And I also had a family history of preterm birth. I went into labor at the end of week 25. I was on a flight. And in Ireland, we only have 19 hospitals that deliver babies. So when I landed, we had to drive 200 miles to tertiary unit in order for it to be delivered by emergency section. I guess in the greater scheme of things, 200 miles doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're living in Ireland, it's half the length of our country. So for me, it was quite unusual to have to drive such a distance to deliver my baby. Amelia was delivered unresponsive at birth. She was breech. She was 780 grams. And she really was a very, very poor baby when she was born. I didn't see her for about 24 hours. And even seeing her for that first time, it broke my heart being brought to the neonatal intensive care unit and realizing that I'd had a baby a day previously, but I didn't know what she looked like and I couldn't recognize her. And I stood in front of the glass, in front of the NICU, looking at all the incubators. There were only 10 of them and still not sure who she was. And it was so hard as a new mum to reconcile that feeling, because my body still told me I was pregnant and I knew I wasn't. She was very unwell in those early days. She was ventilated for 4 weeks. We had many evenings where we were told not to go home, that she wasn't expected to pull through. She had all the usual typical experience of a 25-weeker. She didn't have a brain bleed, but she did have very poor respiratory output. She had many infections. She certainly didn't feed for a very long time. It was very traumatic. For me, parenting didn't represent any of what the reality was. My expectations were shattered. At no point in my pregnancy had I ever even contemplated delivering early. Yet when it's on your doorstep, you're forced just to get on with it and to learn what's happening. We found it very difficult. Myself and my husband live so far away from our families. It was very hard for us to be in the NICU all the time, but we persevered. We lived an hour and a half away from our local NICU, so even getting there was problematic for the 3 months that Amelia was in hospital. Long term, she's 12 at the moment. She still has ongoing issues, which I'm very happy to expand on later on. But what preterm birth has taught me was that it's not an individual experience, it's a lifelong journey. And that is something that I spend a lot of time talking about these days to families, because I think parents are just simply not aware of the risk factors that lead up to preterm birth, nor are they aware of the lifelong consequences associated with it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. You know, when you just mentioned looking through the glass of the NICU and not knowing which was your daughter, that just brought such flashbacks back for me as well. 'Cause I didn't see my daughters for 48 hours till after they were born, and my husband would bring me Polaroid pictures, but I couldn't tell who was who. And so that, that's crushing, and it's very, I think, very common reaction. So you said that Amelia was in the nursery for 3 months, is that right?
Right, she spent 3 months in the neonatal intensive care unit.
And what were her major diagnoses while she was in the hospital?
Amelia's major issues were her lungs at outset, because were lucky enough to get the antenatal steroids. She was administered surfactant shortly after birth, and she was ventilated for 4 weeks. She really struggled with her lungs. She had a lot of suctioning problems, and many occasions we were told that was probably what was going to take her in the end. After about 6 weeks, her lungs started to kick in, and then we were faced with the usual. She wouldn't feed. There was suspected neck. She had several skin infections. She got MRSA, which almost broke my heart. On top of everything, that was the last thing we needed to get. Skin was so fragile, it bled. There are several photographs of her where you could just see the blood seeping out through her skin. It was so translucent. All I wanted to do was take her out of the incubator and hold her, and that was the last thing I could do. And in hindsight, perhaps it may have helped us both at the time, but at that point, you're still traumatized from your early delivery. You don't know what you're allowed to do. You don't know what your parenting role is in the NICU. And certainly in 2006, parents really weren't embraced the way they are these days. Even accessing the NICU was difficult from us. We had to buzz at a door or wait to be admitted. And your heartbeat is pounding at the door because you don't know what lies behind it. And every single day of those 3 months, I almost cried at that door, because you just knew when it opened, it could have been a crisis behind it. It just made it very difficult. I felt there was a barrier between us and her, not only with the incubator, but the access to the NICU. The time restrictions visiting were very difficult. You had to remove yourself from the NICU during rounds and during staff changeover. At no point did you feel like her primary caregiver. At no point did you feel like her mom. At times you actually felt it in the way, or a visitor. Yes, everybody's talking about this new baby that you have. You know, you're not their mom. You're not in reality their mom, because you're not bonding with them. You're not interacting with them. And God love us, they're so fragile. You just don't know what to do.
Right. So Amelia was born in 2006. Is that still what the case is for families who are in the NICU in Ireland now, where they have to leave during rounds, they have to leave during staff change? Has that improved or changed at all in the 12 years?
Well, Ciara, it has improved. When I was in the NICU, there were no family supports whatsoever. And when I met other families, we started off a ad hoc support group, and that's where my organisation has stemmed out of. We started talking to staff members and explained to them what our difficulties were, and as a result, in the interim period, some things have changed. Staff now will allow parents to be present during rounds. They're still not there during staff changeover. Access is still an issue. It's something we have a little bit bugbear about. We don't like to see those signs on the door saying visiting hours are between A and B. We're still working with staff to get them to understand even the psychosocial, psychological impact of those signs for families. It just excludes them from being the parents that the staff say they are. So some things have changed. Certainly families are a little bit more integrated in a lot of the tertiary and level 2 units. It's still difficult in those very early days because parents are so traumatized and they're so upset, and a lot of the time they're afraid to touch their babies. I think we could do a better job of encouraging them and embracing them at that very, very early point in their journey to become parents. But we are getting better.
Right, certainly. And so now you mentioned there are 19 hospitals in Ireland where babies are delivered. How many of those are the tertiary care nurseries that can take care of the extremely premature babies?
4 of those units take care of those babies, and 3 of those 4 are in our capital city. So there's only 1 in the south of the country.
Oh, wow.
We have 4 level 2 and then 11 level 1 hospitals. And the 11 level 1 are really step down units. So once babies transition from tertiary to either a level 2, if their locality is close to a level 1 and they're well enough, they will be transferred back.
Okay. And what about the design of the NICU? It varies so much here in the United States. We have so many NICUs. Was it a large open room with, you said 10 isolates? Is that kind of a standard design, or are they all different depending on which hospital you're in?
Here, all our hospitals are really old. We have no new builds. So all of our units, they're all open units. Our newest unit is in Cork, and that is still an open unit. A lot of them have an isolation room for babies who are very sick or babies who may be infectious, but we don't have single rooms yet. So all 10-bed units, 15-bed units, very cramped conditions, quite difficult to put a chair next to every incubator and allow skin-to-skin care. It's very challenging.
That was my next question was, how do you think that lack of privacy impacts the parents, or how did it impact you in being able to bond with Amelia?
Privacy wasn't an issue. I don't think parents care about privacy. I think parents are much more interested in learning how to parent their child, and they will do it in whatever the circumstances that they're provided with. Parents just want to be able to be parents in the unit, and they do require assistance and support to transition into that role. And I think no matter how small a unit, there should be no excuse to putting a kangaroo mother care chair next to an incubator. No matter how cramped it is possible. I think babies do so much better when they're skin to skin care than lying in incubators. We need to be able to facilitate that much better.
And so you've done a lot of work over the last 12 years, worked with a lot of families, a lot of healthcare providers. With what has changed in the last 12 years, what do you think could have been done to make your time in the NICU better or a more positive experience for you?
Kira, when my daughter was born and we weren't allowed to touch her or hold her or skin to skin care with her, I decided to keep a diary on a daily basis because I was in the NICU for hours on end every day with very little to do. And a lot of my observations were just simply observations at the time of a parent with lots of hours on her hands. In the interim period, I started doing some work with the NIDCAP Federation International in the United States. And what they've taught me was that all our infants talk to us in gestures and behavior. And now reading back on a lot of my diary entries, I now know that my daughter was telling me that she was suffering, that she was stressed, she was having a hard time in the NICU and was looking for comfort just simply by the way her hands were, the way her legs were, how tense she was, the colour of her body. I wish back then that I was able to read my daughter's behaviour and her gestures, and that I wish I was able to respond to her, because I feel this enormous guilt at times that I observed her behaviour but didn't know what to do about it, because we didn't know anything about NIDCAP in Ireland. We now do, obviously, But yeah, I sometimes look at Amelia and think, could things have been different? Would she have turned out slightly different? Would her sensory issues not be quite as severe had we responded to her telling us that she was having a difficult time in those early days? I have no doubt she was in pain. She looked agitated all of the time. And I would have documented that, but just simply couldn't interpret it.
Right. So can you tell us a little bit about NIDCAP for those in the audience that aren't familiar?
Sure. NIDCAP, it's all babies' brains take time to develop, and our preterm babies, when they arrive, not alone their brains, but the rest of their body takes time to mature. Those babies are meant to be in utero. They're not when they're born, they're in an incubator. So what they're doing is their little brains are interacting with an external environment that they're not prepared for. And while their brain is developing, it's also trying to process external stimuli. And this external stimuli is too much on many occasions. So we're talking noise, sound, smells, touch, and that affects the way the brain pathways develop. And as a result, some of our children can have a lot of sensory issues. My daughter in particular she has so many issues in relation to her smell, her sense of smell. She doesn't like bright lights, loud noises affect her. She has problems with textures. She has problems with feeding. She's got problems with her balance. And I've no doubt that a lot of her early experience in the NICU has contributed to some of her ongoing issues now. And I think with NIDCAP, the staff are trained to observe the babies in such a way that they can spot the tiniest change, tiniest physiological change in that baby. And they will look at that baby before they interact with that baby to see, is that baby in a position to accept external stimuli? And sometimes those babies are better off being let rest for a little while before you start doing cares, before you start doing changes, before you start taking blood. Because if the baby is stressed before you approach the baby, you're only going to make the matters worse. So the NIDCAP trained professionals actually are led by the baby's gestures. And as a result, then we're protecting the brain development of these infants and definitely improving outcomes as a result.
That's fantastic. So I'm going to bring Erica back with us because we'd like to talk a little bit now about what the Irish Neonatal Health Alliance is doing, the changes that you are creating in your country, and kind of do a compare and contrast if that suits you. Erica?
Yeah, it was interesting as we were preparing for this and all of us were talking ahead of time and how you brought home with your story, Mandy. I mean, again, to think, well, first of all, the idea of going into labor while on a plane is terrifying. And I think that my drive to the hospital was maybe 10 minutes. And so 200 miles just seems insurmountable. I have such empathy and appreciation for what that must have been like. But it also makes me think about, like you said, Ireland is a relatively small country, and there are only a certain number of units that provide care. And as Kira alluded to, in the U.S., the distances are wide, and the care is disparate from place to place. And I'm curious. We had talked before we got online today about how do you bring better standardized care for these infants. And so can you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Europe right now and what you think the promise is of this sort of standardized care?
Sure. For the last 4 years, I've been working with some European colleagues at the European Foundation for the Care of Newborn Infants. They're an umbrella organization for a lot of our parent organizations throughout Europe. We've been looking at trying to draft standards of care for newborn health. Ireland is really small, but if you compare Europe, the size of Europe, it's very similar to the United States. And if we compare and contrast care delivered in neonatal units in Ireland versus Macedonia, Lithuania, it's probably very similar to the States. There's a huge broad spectrum of care delivery. So these standards that we've been working on with 220 healthcare professionals are looking at every aspect of neonatal care. We have 11 topics that we've chosen. The website is newbornhealthstandards.org. And within those standards, there'll be about maybe 10 to 15 within each topic. And what we're looking at is we're trying to standardize care right across a spectrum where currently they're so diverse, it almost seems impossible. So what we've chosen is a minimum entry level that we're hoping that units will benchmark themselves and say, okay, currently we don't have 24-hour access, we have 1 hour access a day. Let's just aim for 4 hours access. So we have a tiered system where units can slowly but surely standardize their care and bring it into line with some of the top quality NICUs in Europe. It's a really innovative idea. It's been embraced by over 220 healthcare professionals who very eagerly joined this project. So there is that appetite there to improve things, to make things better, and also to unify decision making. For us to do things on a country by country basis, it doesn't work. It only works, and it's only implemented at a local level. I think to do it at a European-wide level has a much greater impact. It has much bigger buy-in, and it's probably an idea that could easily be translated into the United States.
I think it's very exciting to hear, and I'm looking forward to the official launch, which I believe is occurring this month in November. So we'll be sure to share that information with our audience as soon as we have all of the official information allowed to be shared. So what do you think, what are the top 2 main challenges that you see NICU families facing in Ireland? You spoke very eloquently about the barriers to literally access their child. Would you say that that is one of those main challenges?
I think one of the main challenges for parents is to be allowed parent in the NICU setting, and that includes access. Parents are primary caregivers and ought to be treated as such. And if we embrace them as such, we're building on their competencies and their capabilities. And by the time they're discharged, they're in a far better place to parent these children, and many of whom who go home still quite fragile. And the second thing is, if we don't do that, we're only feeding in to the lifelong trauma and psychosocial impact that preterm birth has. We have parents who come to our organisation looking for help many, many years after delivering, who are still so traumatized, who have postnatal depression, PTSD. And I think a lot of their mental health issues definitely relate to the experience in those early days. If we get that right in those early days, we will definitely have better outcomes for the family and for the child. And I think ongoing support, ongoing mental health support for families after discharge is so important. We do not have any community follow-up for families. Only children who are born under 32 weeks will get brought back for follow-up. The families never get brought for follow-up. Nobody asks the mum and dad, how are you doing? How are you coping since you went home? They struggle. They just mull on. For me, I often say when I'm talking publicly, I didn't feel like a mum for the first 3 years. I felt like a carer. I kept on thinking that Amelia was going to die and it would be my fault because I didn't know what I was doing. And every time she got sick, I was projected back to a time when she was in her incubator having a really bad day and I was totally out of control. And definitely for those first 3 years, at no point can I say I enjoyed being her mum. And I regret that. I regret not having any joyful moments. And I think had my experience and the follow-up been slightly better, we can definitely prevent those 3 very long sad years, because it's time lost. You don't get that time back.
Right. Very powerful. Erica, sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah, it certainly does.
A lot of families that you've worked with, that I've worked with, that our members work with. Did you have another question, Erica, that you wanted to ask Mandy?
No, but it just kind of brings back the point. And again, when we talk about prematurity, I think one of the most eloquent things that I always hear said is it's not just the baby that's born preterm, it's the family and the parents are born preterm. That normal progression that you would get and the typical experience that you anticipate welcoming your child in the world has been fundamentally altered, and those experiences last a lifetime. They don't have to be determinative. It doesn't have to be a fatalistic approach to supporting parents, because there's so much resiliency. And I think, as Mandy says, if from the beginning we support and nurture that baby and the parent together, then we are healing so many of the things that have happened and preventing so many of the difficulties that that many of us have experienced. I really believe that we can nurture these families in a way that helps heal them both of the trauma of the preterm birth, but also of the consequences of the preterm birth.
So, Mandy, let's talk a little bit about your organization, the Irish Neonatal Health Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit about how this started and what the mission main initiatives are?
Sure. We started as just a simple support group. We were parents in the NICU talking to each other, reaching out, looking for help because it simply wasn't there in 2006. And it morphed out of that into something far greater than we could ever have anticipated. These days we have 5 pillars that comprise the charity. So we have support, advocacy, education, research and development, and raising funds. On the support end, we offer a comprehensive website. We have a private parenting forum, we do peer-to-peer support, and we also have a medical advisory panel that parents, after discharge, if they have any developmental issues, can consult somebody for free online and get guidance and direction. On the education front, we actually believe that parents, certainly where I work in Ireland, we do not know about preterm birth. Nobody talks about it. Nobody talks about it in antenatal classes. Nobody talks about it in school when our children are learning about biology. We have started that conversation. We deliver workshops to families. We deliver workshops to healthcare professionals. We go into schools and we talk to children about preterm birth, but we do it at a level that's suitable for their age. So we try and get them involved in community projects. We get them making incubator covers, knitting for NICUs, something that engages them at their level. So they're talking about it, they're aware of it. On an advocacy front, we did the very first benchmarking report, which actually had a look at the entire neonatal system in Ireland in 2010. Nobody had ever done that. Nobody asked what were we doing. Nobody asked what every NICU in Ireland was doing. And when we did, we were able to produce a report and go, everyone's doing a lot of different things. We need to start working together. What our organisation does is we are a platform. We work with all the stakeholders. We give them that platform to come together, to work around a table, to achieve all of the same goals. People were doing it in different ways and nobody was doing it cohesively. So we try and work with them. We now have a model of care for neonatal services. We had no guidelines up to 2015. Every hospital was doing its own thing. We now have a paediatric charter. We now have special maternity leave. So our organisation has helped facilitate those changes. What we've also done in the last 5 years is concentrate hugely on research and development because we have some very, very innovative researchers in this country, a small number of them, but they are incredible. And working with them collaboratively, we've been able to guide the research that's been happening. So we are now talking to our families saying, what makes a difference to you in your life? What would have changed in your child's life if something had been different? So we can now tell researchers whether their research is actually going to be meaningful or not. And these days, funding is determined by me. I am the patient collaborator. And if I say I don't agree with what you're doing, the grant isn't given. So I think the paradigm has shifted. We're now looking towards patients. We're now embracing their opinion. Yeah, it's really exciting. And I guess the last thing we do, I suppose, is raising funds. We're a voluntary organisation. We don't get any governmental funding, but everything we do is funded by the donations of the public, by corporate sponsorship, philanthropic grants. All of our publications are free. Everything is available to download from online. We're filling a huge niche in a market, and we keep going to our healthcare system saying you need to start working with us to help us because we are just volunteers. And it is slowly but surely happening. But I guess it's taken 12 years to get this far, but we're still working.
Yes.
It's so exciting, and I can think of a handful of things already. The idea that you're going into schools and talking to people, and that understanding preterm birth should be a part of understanding human biology too. I mean, I can't imagine being Amelia sitting in a classroom and having somebody actually talk about and address this experience, and how many. I mean, that must be true with so many people. And the idea about the patient-led, the family-led research is something that, I mean, we're all working at, but that you guys are just doing an exemplary job with. So congratulations. It's really exciting.
Thank you so much.
So Erica, do we have some final questions for Mandy. Or it would be great to get an update on Amelia.
Let's do that.
You touched on some. She does have some lingering sensory imbalance. Can you talk a little bit about
Yeah,
there she is. She's gorgeous.
And that's one of her million selfies that she I think she does on social media these days. She's 12. She does have ongoing sensory issues, many of which do impact her in school because she finds it very difficult to articulate to her fellow students why she is the way she is. We often say to the teachers, please talk to the class. And when they do, the class are very open to understanding her issues, and they're no longer quirks. She's got a really strong sense of smell, so she may throw up if she smells an orange or yogurt. They're the two triggers. She has very poor balance, but she can run, she can walk, but she can't cycle a bike, she can't roller skate, she can't scooter. She wasn't able to come down the stairs until she was age 7 on her feet because her brain didn't engage with her legs in the morning, which we thought for a long time was just laziness. And over time, as a parent, I had to go and discover that all her issues were sensory related. She wasn't able to work out where she was in space. She will not touch certain things. She doesn't like the feel of a lot of things. She's got a lot of ongoing eating issues, again, related to being ventilated for so long. So she has an oral aversion, and I think a lot of the early feeding techniques used to transition from tube feeding to oral feeding may have flown in the face of her oral aversion, and now she finds it very difficult to eat anything with lumps in it or strong smelling. She doesn't mix foods. She won't touch fruit or vegetables ever, which is slightly scary. Funny enough, I always say she'll eat chocolate and chicken nuggets. So, apparently you could survive on those. Yeah. She's brilliant. She's a fantastic artist. She's a really good dancer. She has some beautiful talents. But she does struggle. She has ongoing chronic lung disease, which does impact her ability to participate in sport. She will try though, and she will always tell children that she's premature. And a lot of the time they don't know what it is. And she'll come home and she'll get really annoyed because they don't believe me. They don't know what it is. Because for her, it's always been part of who she is. She sees the work we do. She's our ambassador for our charity. She loves being out there and being the poster girl, I guess, for preterm babies. And every year we have a neonatal symposium in our country for all our neonatal staff all around the country, and she comes along, and the doctor that cares for her comes to see her. They have that one little 15-minute meeting every year, and it's the loveliest time because this particular doctor was the only doctor that ever asked me how I was, and I will be forever grateful for that comment because I often felt invisible in the NICU. And for someone to turn around and go, how are you today? And she's kept in touch with Amelia. She considers Amelia one of her own. She has photographs of her growing up through the years. It's lovely for them. They give so much to these children and they don't often see what happens to them. So I think it's lovely, that bond that's developed between Amelia and her doctor over the years. I'm so glad we still have her because I genuinely didn't think she'd still be here, given the hard road she had. And when she does get sick, she gets very sick. We don't have somebody who just gets a cold, we get pneumonia. They're the difficult challenges over the years, trying to explain to people it's a lifelong journey. It's not an event that ends at the NICU door. And I wish somebody had told me that. I still hear doctors saying, go home and treat the baby as normal. And I think it's sending people home with a false sense of security. Tell them the truth and give them the support they need.
So what is the most important thing that you would like other parents to hear that are listening today?
It's a lifelong journey. The supports are there. Reach out and please ask for help.
Well said.
Thank you.
Well, Erica, I think that's about all the time we have. Is that right?
No, it is, and it's never enough time, I'll tell you that much. There's so many, thank you so much, Mandy. So many incredibly thoughtful insights, and more importantly, how much we really, really appreciate the work that you're doing, and that you and Amelia too are in the position of being able to participate in the discussion about about care and to reach out to other families and to help give them some of the tools they might need to maybe get them a little further down the road sooner than you might have been able to through your journey. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. I hope it's just the beginning of one of many conversations that we get to have.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been really great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So again, I want to remind people that these conversations that we're having and these interviews that we're doing are all a part of November Prematurity Awareness Month. The Preemie Parent Alliance and the Family Advocacy Network of NPA are both committed to improving family-centered care and to working with parents and providers to be able to create the circumstances under which our families can grow and thrive and capitalize on their resilience. We hope that you'll continue to join us for the other interviews that we're going to be having this month. We're going to talk later today and record an interview with a parent from the Gambia. I know that we're looking forward to conversations with parents and advocates from Australia and Brazil and Canada and the US. And we're just so grateful that you've taken time to listen to these stories. And we hope that you find important information here that will affect how you work with other families and what you do in your practices. Because again, we are so appreciative for everything that parents and professionals do for each other. And as part of that appreciation, we want to let you know that if you visit either of our sites or if before you've accessed any more interviews, you become a member of our organizations, your membership in the Preemie Parent Alliance and in the National Perinatal Association enables us to do more things just like this and to elevate the voices of parents and providers so that we can all have the best, most open communication and dialogue and collaboration that's possible. We hope that you will visit our website, and if you're not a member, become one, or if you're in the position, please consider making a donation, because again, that supports these sorts of conversations that we're so eager to have. So happy November, happy Prematurity Awareness Month. We hope that you are able to gain new insights and new experiences. And if you'd like to get more involved or have a suggestion for a topic, please contact either Kira or myself, Erica, at either of the email addresses that we've provided you. Thank you so much and have a good day.
Thank you.